Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. In this segment, we're talking about the issues of homelessness on the Cape, and I'm here in the studio with Alan Burt, an advocate for the homeless, Billy Bishop, who was homeless on the Cape for many years and then founded an organization to help homeless people, and Bob McGillveary from the nonprofit Homeless Not Hopeless. Welcome to all of you to the show.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Now, let's start by telling people what Homeless Not Hopeless is, because some of our listeners may not have heard of it. It's a very unique organization here on the Cape. Billy, why don't you start?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having us here today.
My pleasure.
Homeless Not Hopeless was formed way back it started in 2006 by homeless people and a homeless advocate by the name of Mr. Alan Burt. We are transitional homes, and we deal directly with people from the woods, the shelters, programs. We try to deal with every human organization here on Cape Cod for the health and well-being of the homeless people. The Duffy Center has been a tremendous, tremendous help to us, and a lot of other organizations also. Transitional housing, we have... right now, how many do we have? 50, almost 60 people, Bobby?
50 people,
50 people. We're housing right now in 4 homes. 2 on Ocean Street, 1 on East Main Street in Hyannis, and the other one on Baxter Road. We have had tremendous success, like I said before. It's an educational program, and what I mean by educational, we're teaching these people the basics, life skills, the kind of thing that you lose in the woods, that you have no need for in the woods. And I'm sad to say this, but I was out there 10 years, and by the time I got myself all squared away with an awful lot of help from an awful lot of nice people, I was to the point in the woods where I had lost all hope of ever finding Billy Bishop again. I lost myself out there. So as far as nice and decent and proper things that my parents taught me, I had forgotten all about those. I think the average person who goes homeless 2 or 3 weeks after he's homeless, he's doomed. If you don't get out of it immediately, you're doomed. You're actually doomed, because there's never enough money to go around. There's nothing. There's no hope. Years ago, when I was homeless, there weren't organizations around like this that are willing to help out now. Money was scarce. Everybody was fighting over the dollar bill. And there weren't that many. Thank God for the Champ House. Thank God for the Noah Shelter. That's all there was back in those days when I was homeless.
Now, Billy, you were homeless, as you said, I think for 10 years, and I think I've heard you tell the story of actually it was Alan that helped you to get out of that.
Absolutely. Alan,
well, Billy, if I may, Billy, excuse me.
Alan and his wife, Dawn. Everybody forgets about Donnie. She's a hero. She is a hero.
No, she's brought over 18 people into our own home over the years, but what I noticed about Billy back then in the early 2000s is Billy is a very bright man, very caring man, and somebody who actually had been helping homeless and people with addictions problems for many years while he had his own business as a fisherman. Billy was lost, but in my mind, the homeless, we have all these organizations with CEOs and all this, pay scales for different levels of supervision, and so much of the money that's raised goes to the operations. Well, why not have the homeless take care of themselves? And that's what Homeless Not Hopeless is about. So Billy and I were founders. Billy started the organization, tremendous success, and then because of health concerns, had to step down. Fortunately, one of the residents there, Bob McGillveary, here with us today, got into his recovery really strong, became a leader in the community, and Bob now is running Homeless Not Hopeless.
And Billy mentioned very briefly about how it was started by homeless people, but I wonder if you could get into that a little more, because this is an amazing story to have a group of formerly homeless people come together and start this organization. How did they go about doing that?
Well, actually, I remember when we first started. I started at the Sunnyside Restaurant recruiting people for Homeless Not Hopeless. Mr. Alan Burt let us use our first house over on the corner of Oakland Road and 28 in Hyannis. That's where the Homeless Not Hopeless was formed, right there in that home, and it was formed by the homeless people and Alan, of course. And then we took on board Judge Joe Reardon, retired the Honorable Judge Joe Reardon, Dick Murphy. We needed people with credibility. I knew when we were in the woods that we could do this, but we needed a hand up. Not a handout, just a hand up.
A house.
A house, that's right. We needed a house, and Alan came through as usual. And I might, people forget, but I don't.
And we know how dangerous and hazardous it is for people to live outside. And recently, very tragically, a man named Raymond Bastille, who had been homeless, was found, had passed on just down the street here at the Hyannis Village Green. Correct. And I think some of you knew Mr. Bastille.
I knew Mr. Bastille very, very well. I met Ray back in 2001 at the Stephen Miller House, one of Gosnell's places. And he was a dear soul, believe me. Ray really, really cared, and he had his struggles like everybody else. God, one thing that really bothers me about these struggles, the general public, as a rule, just jumps all over the drinking and all that type of thing. Well, you know what? Your next-door neighbors are drinking. They're drinking everywhere in society. It's so prevalent. It's an epidemic. All these drugs are really, really, your next door neighbor, what's the neighbor do? He pulls down the shade. It bothers me to think that the very first thought that the general public thinks is they're bums, they're drunks, they're addicts. Well, you know what? Your street's full of them. Your neighbors are doing the same thing, only they got a house to live in. This was a miracle that we put this together, and it's working. Our success rate is phenomenal. And you know what? Nobody's getting paid. We have one paid employee. All these people who work with us daily are so dedicated. They're just so happy to have a roof over their head and food in their bellies that they don't want to get paid. They want to continue doing what they're doing. They're performing miracles. The homeless people are performing these wonderful, wonderful tasks every day.
Well, Bobby's a good story. Bobby who had his own business and then had an injury, and right. You could share your story. And
yeah, I'm unfortunate to be sitting with the two original founders of Homeless Not Hopeless, Billy and Alan, and I don't have the same story as Billy. I wasn't homeless on the street for a long period of time, thank goodness. But I did, like he's talking about, I had a bad accident, and I get into pain medicines, and so I had a bout with drugs and alcohol, and but unfortunately. Like Billy said, a lot of people look at homeless people because of the drugs and alcohol. If you were homeless on the street, it's just because they're homeless and using these drugs. Like Billy said, there's a lot of alcoholics in the world, and they're not all homeless. There's a lot of people using drugs that also aren't homeless. So it's just the fact that they don't have a home. It's unfortunate. Last year we had 34 people die on the street. Up to date this year we've had 8. And it's still early in the year.
And it's been such a cold winter and the challenges. Now, what are some of the challenges to bringing people inside out of the cold?
Just trying to get them in out of a lot of them out in tents in the woods and stuff, because the shelters the shelter here only has so many beds.
Well, it's not just the problem of there's lack of shelters. I mean, Noah Shelter is the only shelter in Cape Cod. So many communities in our state should have shelters. They don't. Only a few do, but the lack of detox beds. You call detox now, and it's very common to be told there's a 2-week waiting list. When a person needs detox, that's a medical emergency. It's a life or death situation. And to be told that it'd be like having a heart attack, going to the emergency room, being told, well, it's a 2-week waiting list before you can get in. There's not enough detox beds. There's not enough rehabs. Everything is short-term. Everything is insurance-driven. If you go to a detox 2 or 3 days and you want to get into a long-term program, oftentimes you turn back out onto the street because there isn't a bed available, and the insurance won't pay longer than a detox.
And that is exactly why the people are dying on the street. Homeless Not Hopeless has been the safety net all these years for people who couldn't get in, people who didn't make the programs, didn't want to stay at the detox, didn't want to go into a long-term program. We've taken them in, and it's a miracle of lives that we have saved.
And unlike most rental situations where you take the best-looking candidates, Homeless Not Hopeless takes
We're taking
the
what
worst.
they call the worst of the worst, if you will.
Right, because they need it the most.
How insulting is that? The worst of the worst.
Right.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. We're talking about homelessness. I've got Billy Bishop, Bob McGillveary, and Alan Burt here with me today. Now, one thing Homeless Not Hopeless has been doing is trying to get all the residents engaged in the community and helping them, whether you help them get a job and give them transportation to that job or setting them up with a volunteer opportunity or just an activity. Isn't that very much a part of what your organization does?
We're trying to re-educate them in going back out to live in society. That's correct.
How important is that to have people involved in activities to sort of get them out of themselves?
It's very important because without the self-esteem, some kind of self-esteem, they're not going to succeed. And what we try to do is once we take them in, we try to get them, first try to get them back into themselves. And ask them try and find out what their needs are, and then try to get them into jobs where they can earn money to go back out on their own and live on their own.
The course I see with folks that fall into homelessness, I call the 4 Ds. There's desperation. They've lost their housing in some way, whether it's income or otherwise. So there's desperation. Then comes depression if they don't get the help. If they're depressed for too long and they're still out on the streets or at the shelter, then they become dysfunctional. And if they stay depressed and dysfunctional too long, they end up dead.
That community atmosphere where you're eating together and cleaning together, and it prevents people from being isolated. Isn't that sort of one of the points of it also?
Right. Isolation is a real bad thing for homeless people, for anybody for that matter.
And I remember hearing Billy talk about the program and talking about it as the education happens around the kitchen table, just as part of really the program. Isn't that right, Billy?
Absolutely correct. You know, the most amazing part about it, I lived this, so I know how I felt, and I'll never forget it. You know, once you do good into homelessness, that's a pretty good sign that everybody's pretty much given up on you. They don't want you at home. The wife's done with you. The girlfriend's done with you. Parents are done with you. Sisters and brothers. When you go out and you're homeless, you know you're not loved anymore. When they come through our door, and you're not respected either by the community or even the people that you're in the woods with, the respect is gone, the love is gone, all those big values in your life that you learned growing up as a child, it's gone. That's pretty depressing. Like Alan said, depression, that'll kill anybody. But what we really try to do is love them back to health. Of course, they're getting fed every day, you know, and physically they're coming back, and we make sure they get to doctors and psychiatrists or whatever they need. but the love that we give them, you know. When was the last time a guy was patted on the shoulder on his way out to work? I love you, brother. I'll see you later on. I mean, these are the big, big things that they don't have in programs. That word LOVE, a program, will get you thrown out.
Yeah, I got a pretty good story just because we're talking about that. I was getting in my car the other day, and one of the fellas, his name is Paul, he came up to me and he gave me a big hug. And I didn't understand. I didn't know. I hadn't done anything at the moment to deserve a hug or anything. And he asked me, he said, "Do you know what that was for?" And I said, "Well, I guess it's good morning to you too, you know." And he said, "No." He said, "I just want to let you know, I want to thank you to both you and Billy for taking me in when you did, because he shared with me that he had two other brothers that are both in jail." And he said, "That's probably where I would be right now if it hadn't been for you and Billy." So,
now, Alan, we only have a couple minutes left. I know you wanted to talk about a special event coming up, too.
Yeah, on December 21st each year I do a sleep out to bring public awareness to homelessness. And this year on December 21st, I had about 6 individuals sleeping out with me in Falmouth. And one of them was Louis Randa. And I just knew Louis being one of the members from East Sandwich Quaker meeting. And what I found out is that Louis is the founder of the Peace Abbey Foundation in Sherborne, Mass., which is an amazing organization. People really should click onto their website, peaceabbeyfoundation.org. And they do work around the world, and they do an award ceremony. And past recipients, have been Mother Teresa, Muhammad Ali, Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, and many others. And they have an award ceremony coming up on April 11th, 7:30 to 9 p.m. at the First Parish Church, 842 Tremont Street, Duxbury, Mass. Again, go to the website, peaceabbeyfoundation.org, and you can learn more about the organization and this award ceremony. Louis is now very focused and concerned about homelessness on Cape Cod. So much of his work, their foundation's work, is overseas, but he's now much more aware. We've got poverty. We've got people living and dying on the streets right here in America, the land of liberty and justice for all. So I am very excited that the Peace Abbey Foundation is focusing on America, because we've got our issues too.
Sounds like a great event. And unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much to Alan Burt, Billy Bishop, and Bob McGillveary from Homeless Not Hopeless for being here with me today on Sunday Journal. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.